And there's a lot that goes on during that time legally. And you are, in that case, you are a homicide suspect. You're actually,
yes,
because they're investigating the case. And again, I wasn't worried about things, but because I felt very justified in what had happened, but I just had this recurring thought.
Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm here with Jon Holsten, Northern Colorado entrepreneur, Jesus follower, family man, and just overall amazing human. Excited to talk about his book, his business, and everything he's doing to make the world a better place. Hey, thanks for tuning into this week's episode. Would you make sure to please like, comment, and subscribe to the channel here, and please share this episode with somebody whose life it will make better. Jon Holsten.
How are you?
Amazing.
Good.
Dude, more amazing that you're here. We've been planning this
for having me.
for
I
a while.
appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks for being here.
Excited.
I remember the first time I heard about you, Emily, my wife, Emily, comes home from a MOPS group. She's like, hey, I got this swimsuit lesson book.
Yeah.
And I go, what a brilliant idea. What an important thing to talk about. I'm
Yeah.
like, who is this guy? She's like, oh, he's police officer. And I don't know where you were in your career at that point.
Yeah.
If you had left law enforcement.
I was
then?
a detective.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, and I may have been out of the detective bureau at that point. I don't know. It depends on, I spoke to a lot of MOPS groups. So
Yeah.
I can't remember that one specifically.
Well, I remember picking up the book and checking it out. Then we shared it with our kids. Mm-hmm. And then we crossed paths again. I think when I got into real estate,
Well, I heard about
down.
you. You probably heard about me. And at some point we just connect. That's how it works. Right?
So yeah, like share your story. I mean, we were just talking offline before camera started rolling. You've got a lot going on. You're a Jesus follower. That is the main guiding light in everything you do. It's always a topic of conversation of business, and everything we're going to talk about business wise. It's a platform for you to show the love of God to people. Yeah,
sure.
But like, how'd you get to where you are today? Like, what are some of the big key moments that got you from TV reporting to police work to realtor? You've got top-notch agents.
Yeah.
And who knows, maybe a couple other things you haven't shared with me yet.
Yeah. I make some stuff up if I have to.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm 53 years old now as we're recording this. A lot's happened in that time for sure. Born in Georgia, moved out to Colorado when I was 7 or 8 years old. Grew up on a farm in Northeast Colorado, so I spent a lot of hours on a tractor as a kid. Child labor laws violated, I'm sure.
Parents breaking the law.
Breaking the law. But man, that was awesome. I loved growing up on a farm. Didn't ever want to go back to one when I was done, but man, it was great. So went to Colorado State University is where I went to college. I majored in communications. Since I was a young kid, wanted to be a journalist. And so I went right from Colorado State into reporting. And I was a reporter and news anchor for 3 years. That's what I did. But I quickly learned that you don't make any money in journalism when you're starting off, right? When you're in a smaller market. So I was married at that point. We had a baby on the way, and it was like, man, I cannot support a family on it. I made $18,000 before taxes.
Before
my first year. Now, granted, that was back in the early 90s, but that wasn't unusual for starting markets. That's what they paid.
Yeah.
And so my wife was in college still. So we were pretty young. She was in college, and she's working 2 jobs and going to school full time. And I was trying to work that. We laugh because we get to the end of a pay period and pay all our bills and have $5 and we like McDonald's,
Yes.
So that's what those times were like. But it got to a point where I was like, man, we really wanted her to be able to stay home with our baby. And so I joined Fort Collins Police Department, which people say, well, wow, you took a step up in pay there, but I really did. In that case, so we did what we had to, made that jump purely financial, man. I'm telling you, I'd never thought about being a cop, never, but because I covered police and crime and courts and stuff like that, I was kind of drawn to it, knew a lot of people and was able to pass the test, I think, unless I got some favoritism there. I don't know what happened. But regardless, I joined Fort Collins Police. I was there for 17 years. It was it was a great journey. It was really good. I enjoyed it. From there, after 17 years, I just felt like I wanted to build something for myself, a business for my family, and create something and run with it. So I'd never thought about real estate. I had never thought about it. But I had some friends and I asked them, I was like, hey, what do you think I would do well? And several of them mentioned real estate. And so I actually put together what I call a council of 12, Matt. So what I did is I put these people in, I chose people who I knew would support me and likely would not. And I met with all 12 of them, my wife being one of them. And I laid out my business plan for them literally on like a big chief pad, right? It was scratched out.
Yeah.
And I said, hey, this is what I'm thinking about doing. Of those 12 people, 10 said, you absolutely should do this. We think you should do it. I had one that said, this is like a little shaky. I don't know. And one was like, you're a fool if you do this. Because I had a good job at that point, right? I mean, I'd worked myself up to a sergeant in the police department. And but when I had 12 people, which I a strong believer in the proverb of many advisors.
Yes.
And that counsel is very helpful. So I had 10 of the 12 say, I think you should really do this or you're going to regret it. You'll always wonder what would happen. So I made the jump. And I never did a day of law enforcement and real estate on the same day.
So you fully cut the ties.
I cashed in one of my retirement funds so I could live for 6 months. I poured money into my business to launch it the right way. My wife is at home. Not my mom, my wife. Sometimes I feel that way, but my wife was at home with our kids. I was single income. So we totally jumped one day, took a month off, jumped into real estate, and it's been very good, and then from there, I've started a couple of side ventures when it comes to some real estate related things. But we were talking about the book, and just real quick, the book came from my time in the Crimes Against Persons Unit at Fort Collins Police. I investigated primarily child sex crimes. And I learned during that time two things. Number one, parents, so many people, they do not realize how much abuse happens. Okay. And so I realized that people need to be educated. And two, they don't know how to address it with their kids. So it's a children's book where the child, you read it with your child and they are watching third person. They're watching this interaction between a mom and her kids. It's very non-threatening, great illustrations because I didn't draw them. Yeah. And, so it's been very successful, popular book amongst parents and families around the country, around the world, really. And so it's been encouraging. So that was one maybe good thing that came from that time. It was a very hard time investigating those cases.
Yeah. How did you manage that? Just seeing that?
I didn't.
Having to investigate.
I didn't well.
No. Yeah.
I did not well. And I'm pretty I'm transparent with it during that time. And again, I did that job for about 3 years, 2.5 years. Mm-hmm. I went into very deep depression. I went into anxiety. I had young kids the same age as the victims I was working with. And so, you project these cases on your own children. You think about it that way. Went into just a bad place. Struggled in my marriage during that time. It just had to take some time off and eventually transferred out of that. But that's why I'm really, I can truly relate. Everyone has their own experience, but I relate with the depression, anxiety, living in a dark world for a bit. So I dealt with it by transferring out of the unit, honestly, and then just kind of working my way back, through therapy and just some different things. Very hard time. Yeah. So,
yeah. Well, thank you for that, sir. Thank you for the service overall of being a police officer. And then, the police officers that have to see that and hear those stories, that's got to be. I couldn't handle that.
You're dealing with just bad stuff all the time. It's exhausting after a while. And today, it's a different. I left 12 years ago now. It's a different world now. It's even more difficult culturally to be a police officer.
Yes.
So
what year did you leave?
It's a good thing that I'm gone.
2010, 11?
2012.
12.
When I left.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we hadn't hit that part in our culture and history where just everybody hates you.
No,
right?
in fact, when I was a police officer, I was involved in a fatal shooting where myself and two other officers, unfortunately, took the life of a suspect. And I think if that would have happened today, it would have been a different story, as far as how that would have been handled. And it could have been very, just a different outcome as far as people's reaction. At the time, we had a lot of support. Now I just don't know. It's a different thing for these officers.
See, I didn't know that. You've never shared that with me. No, that's the first time I've heard about that. Yeah. I know a couple of the guys that we have trained and just run into, in law enforcement that have been involved in shootings say it highly increases your chances of being involved in another one.
Isn't that interesting? It's very true. 1% to 3% of police officers ever discharge their firearm or a weapon in the line of duty. It's a very low number. So, and then if you've had it happen once, it seems to happen more. But I mean, I had several fellow officers who were in that situation, and they were all very distinct, very valid shootings that they were in, so it wasn't like they were trigger happy, as some people say. It was just like, no, I don't know why. They got into a second circumstance, and where it was very justified. So, but that was a very pivotal time in my police career. I think maybe we'll have some of the officers who I worked with. This is kind of maybe a good time to bring this up real quick. Yeah. But a lot of people, I think, wondered, hey, is that why Jon left law enforcement? Because that was a couple of years before I left. And I can just say no. It's not. I actually felt after that shooting happened that I had more confidence in my job, that I knew that if something happened, if I was in that position, I could act quickly and make the decision, that I had to make. So I came away from that more confident. Yeah. And a lot of people, are very traumatized by that situation. And I'm thankful and I do credit my faith for walking through that situation. In fact, do you care if I share one quick story?
Share away.
As it pertains to that?
Yeah,
absolutely. A lot of people do struggle with the trauma of a shooting, and it's very, very valid. I'll tell you just briefly what happened there. I and two other officers, actually there were several officers on this call, and we were at the front door. A suspect would not come out of the house, and he had a warrant. And we were just trying to contact him and take him to jail on the warrant, but he wouldn't come out. We had two other people inside the house who came out and said, he's acting really weird, and we just want to get out of there. Shortly after, he came out and he pointed a gun at another officer, and the three of us shot. Okay. As I stepped over him to clear the residence, I saw that it was a flashlight. But he had come out and he took a shooter stance, and it was obvious what he was doing. It was what we call suicide by cop. And so we did what we had to do. I never regretted it. I didn't have problems with it. But the one thing, Matt, that bothered me was, one, I killed somebody's little boy. That was hard for me on one hand. The other piece of it, though, was I woke up the next morning crying. And it wasn't because I felt guilty or I felt wrong, that I did something wrong or bad, but I just kept having this recurring thought of I killed somebody, and it wouldn't go away. It was this intrusive thought that it ruminated in my mind. This happened on a Wednesday night. Saturday morning, so it's gone on for 3 days of just constant rumination. And there's a lot that goes on during that time legally. And you are, in that case, you are a homicide suspect. You're actually, because they're investigating the case. And again, I wasn't worried about things, but because I felt very justified in what had happened, but I just had this recurring thought.
A big shout out and thank you to one of our sponsors, M&D Painting and Roofing. M&D was actually founded by my wife Emily and I back in 2005. And for the last 2 decades, we've been here in northern Colorado of one of the leaders in residential and commercial repainting, as well as most recently installing residential roofs. So if you need to paint, re-roof, you got hit by a hailstorm, we can take care of whatever your home needs from top to bottom. You can find us on the web at mandepainting.com. Hey, just want to give a big shout out to one of our sponsors, Imprint Digital. If you're a small business owner, one of the things that you need to navigate to be successful is all things online and digital in terms of marketing and your messaging. Imprint Digital, they're the real deal. They are the professionals and they know this world inside and out. Make sure to visit their website at imprint-digital.com.
And I took my kids to Christmas program practice at our church, and I went on a walk in a nearby park just to clear my head. And I'm walking through the park, and I can remember exactly where I was. I'm walking around these tennis courts, and it came to mind, man, I killed someone. I can't take that away. And Matt, there's been 3 times in my life that I felt like God spoke to my heart. Okay. But I felt like God took my face in his hands and looked in my eyes and said, no, you didn't. I did. And as soon as that happened, it went away. I never had the issue again. Because it's one thing when your friends
lifted it
away.
Yeah.
And it's one thing when your friends are like, John, you did what you had to. Everyone's like saying, hey, you did what you had to. It's another thing when God tells you that and you feel very impacted by it. So I think that's one reason I walked out of that not feeling as traumatized, because I feel like that was something that was very powerful that happened. I used to not be able to get to that story without being tearful.
Oh, I'm tearful right now. Joey, cut the cameras.
But
no, that's
that was a powerful moment for me. And yeah.
So what? Gosh, that brings up so many thoughts, right? I have a lot of friends in law enforcement. They're here training.
You've been involved in some stuff with.
Yeah, and then we've been involved in situations I've never
providing some equipment and.
Yeah. But just from what I see is there's got to be a trauma there in that. Like, so seeing the sex crimes against children and taking somebody's life, like that's gonna play a story. It seems like you leaned into. Not seems like it did. You leaned into your faith. You're God, take this from me. Have that conversation. But I see and hear about guys and gals that don't. They sit on it, they stew on it, they go to bad places, right? So, like, what would you just say to, and not even that big, the big event, right? There's these little micro events, these little things you see, the little 1,000 paper cuts. What would you tell somebody in law enforcement that's in it and they're just seeing those little things and they're going to dark places and maybe they realize it, maybe they don't, but maybe this just opened up to that. Like, what were the steps? What would you tell them?
Well, first off, it's called vicarious trauma. So a lot of times you see what's happening in the lives of other people and you're dealing with it. And sometimes it's just hearing stories that you take home with you. And everyone likes to think, well, you leave your work at work, and you don't. Vicarious trauma, and then just a cumulative effect of a lot of trauma over a long period of time. So those can cause just some mental health issues. And it's okay to acknowledge I have issues here. And when people are so what I say to other officers, and it's not just officers, it's first responders, it's medical professionals, it can be anybody who is just military. And I don't pretend to know what it's like to be in the military. I never was. I don't pretend to know what it's like to be in the medical field. Never happened. So everyone's experience is different. But when they start seeing things in their lives that are falling apart, it's time to time out and get help. Talk to somebody about it. A lot of agencies and first responder organizations have peer support now that they can go and talk to someone. Go see a psychologist. Go see a psychiatrist. Yeah. Get medical treatment if you need it. Just to get away, from the taboo subject. I can tell people, I'm a very whole person now, but I have not always been. And I've been in deep, dark places where I wasn't suicidal, but I certainly didn't want to wake up, if that makes sense. And sometimes I wonder would I be here if I hadn't had a wife and 6 young kids.
Because you got 6.
I have 6 kids. And so, but I had this responsibility that I'm like, I can't leave that. But at the same time, so I know what it's like to feel like you don't want to live anymore. You don't, you're not necessarily going to kill yourself. Although when people say I'm suicidal, which I'm like, I get it. I don't get your specific situation because no one knows how someone else feels. But I understand what it's like for your personal pain to be so much greater than anything good in your life.
Mm-hmm. To where you've just lost sense of purpose.
Yeah,
not gonna get up today. Yeah. I'm just gonna hang here.
So
I've been there too, man. Yeah.
Yeah. So when people get to that point, get help. Just understand you can't do it on your own a lot of times, and that's okay. And when people get to a point where they are in that place for so long, it becomes a medical issue with brain chemistry.
Yes.
You've got to be very careful. So when you're finding that stuff happening early on, get help, because the longer you wait, the chance is it can be tough to come back out of it. You will. I remember one of my therapists, I told him, man, I would give my right arm. If you could cut my arm off and I would feel better, I would totally do that. He goes, you don't want to do that because you're going to feel better and then you won't have an arm.
Yeah.
You'll get there. You should, if you work through things, you'll get there. But that's my encouragement to people in law enforcement, first responders, different works where there's a lot of trauma. Get help, acknowledge that, hey, this is a normal thing. A lot of people go through this. The problem is a lot of people go through it. A lot of people don't get help. That's why there's failed marriages. That's why there's suicide. Suicide is at one point, I guess I can't say at the moment statistically, but it was the number one reason for police officer deaths was suicide. And so, I know we're kind of off on a tangent of
I'm glad we went there. I mean, I think it's so important. And I don't, obviously there's a lot of men listening to this. Is it harder for a male who's a police officer to say, I'm not okay? Because that's the big thing, just I'm not okay. Well, and I need help. Do you think it's a male, female? Do you think it's that profession in general, that
I think it's a
image that you need to uphold? You have to be okay at all times, or you can't do your job, right?
Yeah. Well, there were times that I was fearful that if the management knew where I was, that my gun would be taken away. And I was, I remember sitting on the stairs. So I concealed some of that, right? Mm-hmm. I would have, Matt, if I would have felt like I cannot do this job safely, I would have pulled myself because I'm not going to do that, right? I just knew I was committed to it, that I was going to make sure I could do it. But when I came out of investigations, went back into patrol, and this is before I was a supervisor and a sergeant, I remember some mornings get my uniform on, and I was so anxiety-ridden. I would sit on my stairs at the house in my uniform and sweat profusely. 7 o'clock in the morning. I just couldn't, I just struggled knowing what I was going to be dealing with all day. And so, there were days that I called and said, hey, I just cannot come in today. I was so supported by administration once I got to that point, because they really were looking out for me and for the community, right?
Yeah.
So I pulled myself a couple of times and said, I just can't do this right now. And they were very supportive, because I think, but guys, get help. I mean, I don't know what else to say. I'm just, don't put yourself and your family in that, because there's a lot of victims outside of yourself. There is your wife, there are your children, there are your friends and family, and, people around you who are also taking the brunt of what you're going through. So it's just, it's a responsibility thing.
Thank you for sharing all that, man.
Sure.
I didn't think we were going to go there. We were talking. I
know, we haven't even talked about that
Like,
before.
what are we going to talk about? The book and real estate and business, and super, super valuable though. I mean, the two big things I take out of that is like the 80% of the way is to admit you're not okay.
Yeah.
And go get help.
That's right.
And people are going to support you. Yeah. Maybe there's some people that will judge you or have something to say, but man, they got stuff going on. Everybody has stuff.
And it's the same thing with abuse, by the way.
Yes.
I would talk to, I've talked to thousands of people on the book and probably hundreds of groups, right? I don't know, a lot of people. And the one thing that with people coming up to me, talking afterwards, or just I'm a firm believer, even from my assignment, is that you're not free. People are not free to heal completely until they disclose that. So that goes back to even the mental health, because there's a lot of mental health involved with abuse as well, right? But I mean, it's just get help, disclose, even when it's hard, to start that recovery back.
Yeah. Yeah. So what's the plan with the book? What's the vision with the book? You just brought in another version of the book.
Yeah.
The Spanish version.
For years, and for years, people have been asking for a Spanish version, but this is a self-published book, Matt. And the first time I wrote the book, I mortgaged my house. Took a second mortgage on my house to fund it. And it took, it was about 20 grand to publish it at the time. I didn't want it to go to a publisher because I wanted to control the content, and I wanted to control who was going to illustrate. And I wanted to put in there what I knew would be helpful. And I didn't want someone in New York or wherever to make some decisions on my text, and so I decided to do that. It ended up being very successful, but came out with the Spanish version. And, I think this is peanuts compared to a lot of people I get, but for a self-published book, I think we've sold around 30,000 copies, something like that over time. So there's a lot of families impacted, which has been really good. So the Spanish version, we're excited about it. I've actually, the business side of it, never been a huge moneymaker at all. It's more a labor of love. We were kind of talking about that earlier. The Spanish version will be the same thing. I actually have a child advocacy center, which is a national organization, but our local CAC is running with the Spanish project. And I'm just kind of letting them, for the next few years, take anything that comes from that, to help bolster that organization. But we'll see what happens with it. But I'm excited in that culture that will have that resource for them after a lot of years of people asking.
I mean, it's another 250 million people, I think, roughly, right, worldwide, that now can hear that message.
Now have a different, have a new resource on it. So it's interesting because I've been told it's a very popular book in Southeast Asia, which is interesting.
Philippines, or where was it?
Indonesia,
right? Okay.
That area. And I'm curious how they understand it, a lot of them, but I don't know. Maybe it's just they kind of talk through the concept. But anyway, this is an example of where I have a friend of mine. His name's Michael Card, and Michael is he's a musician, he's an author, a pioneer in the gospel music world. And when I wrote the book, he said, "Jon, just bless your community, bless your church body, bless your city. And if God wants to take it from there, he will." Yes. And it'll move out from there. And that's what's happened. So it's been fun to see. And I think that's in all of our lives, right? And that's not just a book project. That's in our business. How can we bless people in our lives? When it comes to, for me, real estate right now, when I go into someone's home to talk to them about real estate, how can I season their life in such a way that they see something good, that they experience something great, and from there it spreads out,
I remember getting into the real estate business, and I've been in business before, right? So I understand cold calling and lead generating and all of that. And you've got your ninja selling, right? All these amazing programs in your program. And then I sat down with some of the top agents here in Northern Colorado. Hey, what did you do? How do you become successful? And out of everything that everybody said, and out of everything that you said, the one thing I remember the most out of everything was something that you said. You may or may not remember it. And you're like, "Matt, the business is all fine, but the really cool thing I get to do is I get to go out and sit with people and show them the love of Jesus, show them the love of God in a real estate transaction or, a divorce or a difficult situation." And I'm like, man, that's what you get to do.
But our job should be a ministry
all day. Yeah.
For those of us who are faith-based and, we want to impact the world in that way, it's a ministry. So some people say, "Hey, what business are you in?" And the quick response for real estate is, well, I'm in real estate. No, you're not. You're in the people business.
Yes.
And people say, well, what's your product? And some people say, well, I help people buy and sell homes. No, your product is the experience that people have when they work with you. Anybody can put your house in the MLS.
Yes.
Anybody can get it ready to list, but what makes you different? And so, it's that experience they have, world-class service, that is huge to people. And so that world-class service is a responsibility, I feel, on our part to honor God in doing all that we do for his glory. And I think anything less than giving 100% is not right.
Yes.
So our people should experience that.
Yeah, and it was interesting popping into the industry. Well, we're getting into the industry because it seems like anybody can kind of pop in, pop out. When things are good, everybody's getting their real estate license and relatively low barrier to entry.
Yeah, 87% don't make it.
Mm-hmm. And then
87%.
And then right now, the ones I think that aren't gonna last, aren't gonna do the hard work and the harder times are gone. What's been some of the frustration with you with some of the things you see in the real estate industry? I've got a couple. Not that I want to focus on the negative, but for an agent listening, what are those things where it's like, don't be that guy, don't be that gal, don't do that.
That's a great question.
Because top notch. I mean, you're building one of the leading coaching programs, and you're taking that across the country at least, if not I think the world, right?
Yeah, there's
whoever speaks
there's
English.
2 million. Yeah, exactly. There's over 2 million real estate agents in North America, and I feel like I have a message that can help most of them, especially the new agents and agents who need to reboot their business. So I would say one of the things that frustrates me most, just circumstances, are people who jump into the business thinking it's easy money, thinking, hey, this is low investment into my business, just yada, yada, yada. And I go, man, 87% of people do not make it in real estate. That means 87% probably shouldn't have tried. Okay, potentially. And so to be very, very cognizant of your circumstances when you get into real estate. But the people who often don't succeed, I found there are 5 things that oftentimes cause that. Number 1, they don't know their why. Why are they doing it? And sometimes when the why is money, Matt, you and I are in real estate. If you're doing it solely for the money, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Okay. Number 1, they don't know their why. Number 2, they don't have the money to start a business. Number 3, they don't have a good sphere of influence of people that they can work with right off the bat. 4, they end up in the wrong brokerage. They're not where they should be. And 5, they're not teachable. So when you sat down with agents, top agents, and you said, tell me what you did, tell me what you do, how do you get there? I did the same thing. When I started my first brokerage, I went into the marketing department. I said, tell me what the top producers do. And they said, well, they do this and this and this and that. And they spend money here and they buy this marketing. And I said, sign me up for everything. Whatever the top producers do, I'm going to do, because we can replicate that. Yeah. There's a lot of people very successful in real estate. And if you replicate what they do, you can be fine. And I say we do not have to recreate the wheel, but we all have our own spokes.
Hey, if you're a business owner and you need to do some renovation in your space or possibly build a building from the ground up, you have to connect with one of our sponsors, Mendel Construction. Mendel Construction is a commercial construction company that's been around since 1997, serving all of Colorado. They can do a small tenant finish all the way up to ground up construction of a new building for your business. Check them out at mendelandcompany.com. That's MENDEL and company.com. If you're a Christian small business owner and you live in Northern Colorado, you have to check out one of our sponsors, the Foundry Advisory. The Foundry is a Christian executive peer advising group that connects other business owners in the community to help you focus on your faith, your life, your leadership, and your business. Make sure to check them out at thefoundryadvisory.com. If your life or business are cluttered up with junk right now, then you've got to reach out to one of our sponsors, Hulk Addicts Hauling. Hulk Addicts can come out to your home or business to do anything from removing junk to appliances. Maybe you're demoing or doing construction on a property and you need it cleared out. Maybe you need a big dumpster dropped off that they can roll off later. Make sure to check them out at hulkaddictsjunk.com. They are serving all of northern Colorado as well as up and down the Front Range.
And so utilize your spokes.
Yes.
Bring your own flair to it, but don't do all the heavy lifting of recreating that wheel. And so the things that frustrate me are those things. People who don't know their why, who get into real estate. People who don't have money to get into real estate. People who don't know anybody and they jump into real estate. People who don't know anything about brokerages and what's important jump into real estate and they're not teachable. If you can't hit 5, I flip it around. My 5 pillars, right? Know your why, have money, know people, end up in the right brokerage, do your research, and be teachable. Those are my 5 things. And I go, if you can't, that doesn't mean you have to have all 5 to make it. It's just that if, you don't have, if there's about 3 of those things that you can't check off, it's probably a timing thing or it's not meant for you.
To go do something else.
Yeah. How about you? You said you have a few things that
I would add to that. Just do the work.
Yeah.
Like guess and check. So you've got all the spokes in the wheel, right? Go talk to the top 10 in the brokerage. Well, here's what I do. Okay, try that. Go do that 200 times. Whether it's the calls or and track it. And then you might find that I found one of my spokes that I was really good at wasn't what another agent did. Like I had some agents, they love floor. Like I never really picked anything up off
open
of floor.
houses.
I didn't love floor. I don't get excited about floor. I do well at open houses. I'm on a team with Gunner. Gunner's not an open house guy. That guy literally goes out and hangs out with his friends in the community. He's doing he's a young guy, bars, dinners, hanging out, sporting events, and he's closing deals that way. That's his sphere. That's where they are, and he's working it. But just anytime I'm down, and I even got like this year, real estate, the market's changing, so just real estate's going to be down, so then I'm down, so you're not reaching out to your sphere. Holy cow, these 4 people just did transactions, not using me or Gunner, because I just wasn't in touch with them.
Yeah,
just stay in touch with those people. It's so easy to default to that, and I even did that.
It's frustrating. If you're an agent and someone uses somebody else, I usually say, don't blame them. You're the one that wasn't in touch with them, most likely, and someone that did a better job. The average person knows over 10 realtors. And so what is it? Why do they choose you over somebody else? And the statistical answer to that question is it's the last person they heard from.
Yes.
And I want to be the last person they hear from.
Yeah.
And so I believe in marketing. I believe in, people will say, hey, don't spend your money on, marketing's not really important or whatever. It's like, no, it is. I mean, if you want to stay in contact with people. And so in hard markets, people will ask me, Jon, how do I grow my business? How do I close more deals? And my answer in that is the same when it's a strong market. Your sphere. Stay in touch with people, provide value, because people want to chase leads. They want to knock on doors. They want to do cold calls. They want to buy leads. There's nothing wrong with those things. I don't recommend some of them because I haven't seen the return, but that's okay. Yeah. Some people enjoy those things and they get business that way. But for me, I had a large existing sphere of influence, right? When I came out of journalism into 17 years at the police department, into this, I had a great list of people that I could work with. So it's just for those who have that sphere, really focus on that. And that's where you find a lot of your business comes from. Is that not true with you?
It's absolutely
because
true.
You know a lot of people here in our community. Mm-hmm. Is it not true that the vast majority of your business comes from people you know or people they know?
Yeah. And I'm in a unique...
And return clients.
The position I'm in too, because of the multiple business. Somebody asks me, they ask me this all the time. I still can't answer this, and I don't know that I ever will. Is, well, what percentage of your time do you spend? I'm like, I don't. I'm just around the people that I love being around, and we've got multiple companies that serve multiple purposes. And I end up doing real estate business with somebody whose house we painted because I taught their kid jujitsu, and now they're coming to the hike in Spain. Like literally touched all parts of those businesses, and I get to have coffee with awesome people all day.
Your next transaction, your next deal, and this isn't just real estate, this is just different businesses, entrepreneurs, those of us who have been in it for a while know that your next closing, your next deal is very possibly embedded in what you're doing today.
Yes.
So it may not seem like it's real estate related, but it could be. And I tell a story. Someone asked me the other day, "Hey, what is the craziest way you've been introduced to a client?" I thought that's a good question. So I want you to answer that in a second if you can think about it.
Thinking now that you're sharing, yeah.
But here's mine. I was driving down the highway, and I was going to showing, and I heard an explosion behind me. I turned around and I looked in my rearview mirror, head-on collision, 60 miles an hour. These two cars hit. And it was so close behind me that the person had to have been going across the line right by me, but hit the truck behind me. Two drivers had to be cut out of their cars. Took firefighters 45 minutes on both to get both of them out. And I stayed with Marvin, and Marvin was in one of the trucks. We didn't talk real estate, of course. He was in severe pain. Obviously, it didn't come up. But he survived. 2 years later, he looked me up to see what I did or who I was and found out I was a real estate agent. And he called me and said, "I want you to list my house."
Isn't that wild?
And that was wild. Marvin's such a great guy, and we become friends. And it's like, you don't know. I mean, I wasn't trying. It's not like I said, here, tuck my card in his pocket, right, in the car, right? But I'm just saying, you don't know. And take all of our businesses comes from, we just don't know where it's going to come from. And so just to be responsible and helpful, in the moment you're at. So,
and I think you've got to have business structure. Like you've got to know, hey, this is my phone call time or my thank you note time or my touch the sphere time, but then also not being so regimented, because then you feel like, well, I did my calls. I didn't get, no, just go out and be you in the community.
Authenticity, right?
And be you and serve people, and then let them know what you do, at some point. But Marvin, like you didn't go, hey, hope you're better. Here's my Broncos calendar. He looked you up. Like he found you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's yours?
I've got two, and I'm just thinking because they're both current transactions that we're in right now. So in 2012, 13-ish, I ended up in the emergency room here over at MCR. Literally within 3 or 4 months, it was 3 times, and every time I ended up in the ER, same nurse comes to help me, and I'm like, I've seen you around. I think you went to high school together, but there was some distance in terms of years of graduation. But it was the joke. She's like, "Do you want a frequent flyer like punch pass for the emergency room?" And I'm like, I don't know how this ended up. So just stayed in touch. We ended up having mutual friends, and time came for her to buy and sell a property. Then that turned into helping her parents sell a property, and now she's selling another property, and just become a great friend. But like, who thought? Like I think I'm going to die. I should go to the ER, right? Once was a broken rib, once was something else, and back issues, and here we go, And then I've got another one. This gal and her husband, they've become really great friends. We met under kind of duressful circumstances. My son was attending a school here in town, lot of drama, a lot of story with the school, and there was definitely some not cool things happening in this school that had presented themselves to my kids. So I came into that school really hot one day to have some conversations with people that were not doing great things in that school. And this gal literally working at the school, we just reminisced about this the other day. She goes, "I remember the day I met you. You came in wanting to kill the principal of a school, like for good reason,
literally.
And she had to like physically hold me back. I'm there with Emily, and she's like, I had to hold you back. But that, negative situation ended up being great. We became great friends, and hey, we've got a love for coffee and law enforcement. She introduced me to one of the big nonprofits we support, and we're literally standing at her house. It's currently listed, just talking about like how did this all come together?
That's awesome.
And
you
here we are.
never know, right?
Yeah, yeah. And
know.
this was before real estate, but we've stayed in touch.
And that's what's helpful, I think, for the personality of the type of that you and I think both are, is that we connect with people in a meaningful way, and that you always do that. I don't do it for the purpose of business. I do it for the purpose of caring and loving others and taking care of them, because that's just kind of how I want to approach that. And there's a lot that comes from that.
And I see in business when the things that are required for you to be successful in business, which is what you just said, just be authentically you, show up, care for people. You're already doing that. It's already wired in you. It's already ingrained in you. And then you plug into a great brokerage or a great program or a great system. Like that's going to naturally happen. But I see people where they're like, I got to do this. I got to go drop by or drop in and spend this time with somebody. Well, I just want to make they can do the 3% math, right? They got the money goggles. I'm like, this isn't for you. You need to go. Because you might short term be able to churn and burn some numbers and do that, but there's people
especially in a hot market. But things change.
The low hanging fruit, right? When money's free, it's 3%, and if you get a listing, it's gone. How much of a hero are you? Maybe not. But remember those days a couple of years ago?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Get a listing, it's going to sell for more. Well, like whatever you price it at, just about.
Right. Not at least not like that right now.
No.
It may be like that in the future. Who knows? But see, people say, okay, well, but what do I do? Do the right stuff. Just keep doing what you know you need to do. Yeah. Keep taking care of people. Keep providing value. That's all we can do. We don't control the price, home prices and appreciation. We don't control interest rates.
Yeah.
We don't control any of that stuff, but we control how many phone calls we make, how many texts we send out, how many handwritten notes we do. Yep. So when some people say, well, and I disagree with some people on this, or they'll disagree with me, when it comes to goal setting, there's nothing wrong with saying, well, I want to do 20 sides this year, or I want to make, 500,000 gross commission or $1 million. There's nothing wrong with that on one level. We need to have financial goals. Okay. Mm-hmm. But sometimes those are horrible goals, because you don't control how many closings you're going to have. You don't control, your gross commission directly. What you control is what you control.
Yes.
But when you do those right things, it translates into that, right?
It does. So, you've got to control those activities.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I keep it super simple. Like we can walk right over here. Joey, he can turn around and look, but I have my sphere and I print that out on address labels and it sits on my desk, and I'll sit there every day and I look at it. I'm like, I haven't talked to this person in a minute. And I was actually just thinking about that person, and I call up. Like,
and you probably don't talk about real estate, do you?
No. Like, what's up? How are you doing?
You might
How are
not,
the kids? How's the family?
Yeah.
And I give them a call, and then I take that and I write them a note, and I just make sure that, and I've gotten out of that. Like for a short period this year, I wasn't doing that. And I'm like, why is business slow? Must be the market. Easy excuse, right?
Yeah.
But no, just it's sitting right there. Everything's ready to go. And I'm just making sure that I'm doing those activities.
That's right. That's what we control.
Yep. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
So, yeah, and that's a big thing for, I think, new agents and people getting into the business to realize, is that this is not a complicated business. It's complex at times, but overall, be yourself, love on people, care for them, bless them.
Yes.
And let them make sure, they know what you do. But other than that, and that's why people are intimidated by cold calling, right? Well, what am I going to say? How about focus on your sphere and just take care of them? Yeah. Just see how they're doing. That's why I'll text people out of the blue. Hey, thinking about you this morning. I've done that 2 times before I came here this morning already. It's just checking on people. And I don't bring up real estate because honestly, I don't care. If they have something, they'll let me know, but I care about them.
Yeah.
But just maintaining contact with people translates into good stuff down the road, business and personal. I don't do it for that purpose, but it's what works.
I heard a great quote years ago. It's don't mix appreciation with self-promotion. I mean, do you ever get the card or you get the call? Hey, I was thinking about, this guy's really reaching out. This person really cares how I'm doing. How's the family? Oh, great. You're feeling filled up, fueled up. And then right at the end, what do? Yeah. They like pitch you on something.
Yeah, it's the same thing as a really cool handwritten note.
Yep.
Telling someone you're thinking about them and then putting a business card in it.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That's another area I would disagree. Some people would say, hey, always put your card in a card. that's okay. Some people do that. I don't, because I think it's mixing messages.
Yeah.
I don't think it's helpful.
Yeah.
You
Yeah. They
know,
know what you
so-
do, right? They know what you do.
right.
So, yeah. One of the, the main theme that you've talked about, and I want to make sure we get into it before we close, is, when you're talking about police work and everything that you went through and just being vulnerable. Again, thank you for sharing that. And then transitioning into real estate, like faith is the foundational part of your life that you build and base everything on.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, because we've never really shared our faith stories, but growing up on the farm in Georgia, was faith always a part of your life? Did you always have God in your life, or was that something that came at a later time?
Yeah, I was raised in a Christian family. My dad was a Bible school teacher when I was very young, and then he was a pastor. So I always had that influence in my life from parents who were intentional about pointing us to God. I grew up in poverty, really, because again, Bible school teachers and pastors at the time didn't make a whole lot of money, and then farmers definitely don't, at least the type of farmers we were. But, there wasn't a lot of money, but I saw God show up time and time again. And just like when I was telling you about my story of walking through the park after the shooting, Matt, I saw God show up in the life of our family on multiple occasions when we did not have money specifically. And so people will say, well, why are you so set on your faith? Or, I don't know if I believe in God. How do you know for sure that God exists? I'm like, oh, I know because of some things I've seen. I'm convinced. And one of this, whether it was people not having any Christmas presents in our home and having someone back up to our porch and load our porch with Christmas gifts. But one of my favorite stories is my mom, who passed away 5 years ago, as we record this, was a lover of beauty and creation. And one of the things that she loved were flowers. And so one day, when my mom was driving to a nearby town to get groceries, probably whatever groceries she could get, probably not a lot, there definitely wasn't discretionary income. And she prays, God, it would just be nice. This is more of a comment, not even a request, I don't think, on her part. But God, it would just be nice if I had money to buy flowers for our front yard. And she just threw that out. She is coming off the highway and sees something floating in the corner of her eye. She rolls down her window and catches a $20 bill. Okay. Now, logic would say that what happened was she was coming off the highway and a car was going, because it was an exit ramp, and a car was going by and a 20 blew out their window or whatever. I don't know. You can come up with that whatever reason you want.
Yep.
That's a logical reason, but that $20 bill was from God. That's all there is to it. And so I saw him show up in that way numerous times, to the point that I was like, I'm convinced. I mean, so because God was that message from my parents, plus I saw his hand in it, plus I've had things that are pretty monumental, like the walk through the park. I'm very set on what I believe. I don't believe there's consequences. So I grew up in that family. The time that I would say I came to Christ would have been the first time, there's one time, but the first time that I had, I think, a real interaction was when I was probably 9 or 10 years old, where I felt like God spoke to my heart that he wanted me to follow him. But when you grow up in a Christian family, oftentimes you rely on your parents' faith. You don't really embrace it yourself. And I'd say when I got to be a senior in high school is where I was like, okay, this is mine. I believe this, and that's when I embraced it myself, So from there, I just feel like God has been a part of my life. Yes, throughout my life, but I think it takes a specific decision on our part to pursue God, and to not just pursue God, but trust that he is who he says he is in the Word of God. And not just to trust what he says, but to act on that and to submit and to put our lives under his control. And so for me, it's still a constant struggle, right? I still have I fail.
Yep.
I still struggle in areas in my life, but I want to honor him with my life when it comes to every part of my life, from being a husband to being a dad, to being in business. Everything I want it to exemplify. I want it to point people to the Lord is what I want it to do. Sometimes I'm successful with that. Sometimes I'm not, but it's not about me. It's about the power that comes from God to communicate to others in those moments what he has. So yeah, I mean, that's in a nutshell, I guess, but I am a Jesus believer. I'm a Jesus follower. I believe that he is the answer to sin in our world, that he died for us and he took our sin. And I believe that wholeheartedly. And we all have doubts at times about certain things, but I've just seen his goodness and grace in my life in the midst of hard times too, that, I was at times tempted to question, but, I'm assuming you're going to ask us about this.
I am.
Yeah, so I'm going to leave it alone right now, okay? But you have us do a little exercise here before we came on, and it's going to come back to that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's where I'm at with that.
Thanks for sharing. I've got one question about that, and then we're gonna get to the card. It's like we were reading each other's minds right here.
Yeah. Good.
What do you say to somebody that just doesn't believe that, or they're struggling, or they're almost there?
Yeah.
Because I know that's some of the listeners. We have some Jesus following listeners. We have some that are like, Matt, we love your guests and your content. But we don't. We're just not there.
God's big enough to handle your doubt. He's big enough. I think that some people get concerned that maybe I'm making God mad because I don't believe, but it's a normal thing for us to struggle with our faith at times, or lack of faith.
Yeah.
Right? That we just don't believe. But I honestly believe, Matt, that we are created, and in fact, it tells us in the Word of God that we know that there is a God because of his handiwork in creation. So even people who say, I don't believe in God, you're not telling the truth, because you may not understand what that looks like fully, but there is a creator, and you do believe on one level. You be agnostic, right? You don't know for sure, but you kind of feel like there is. Yeah. That's been my experience, and maybe there's someone out there who disagrees with me, and that's fine, but I do believe what the Word of God has to say. So what I believe for those who are on the edge is that just pray. You may have never prayed before, but just pray that God would open your eyes to truth in him and what that looks like, and let him speak and listen very intently. This world is so busy. It's so hectic that we don't take time to listen to what God would have to say to us. And, if you have friends who are of faith, talk to them, pull out your Bible. You never read the Bible, pull it out. Start in the book of John. There's a book, John, in the Bible. Just start reading that about the story of Jesus.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important thing to do. And then, I just think at some point there will be a time where you may be broken and there's just nothing you can do. You think you can rely on yourself or rely on other people, but the only person we can rely on is God. And we will get to this in a minute, but what I would say is at times when I was in the midst of my depression and anxiety, the only thing I could do in the morning, it's like I couldn't wait till it was nighttime so I could fall asleep and escape the world. But I couldn't wait till morning because I just was miserable and trying to sleep at night. It was just the weirdest time. But I would wake up in the morning and the only thing I could do is read my Bible and cry. That is all I could do, the only strength I had.
That's like all that's happening that day
Yeah.
for you. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And there were times that I just had to go and read the stories of Jesus and what that looked like and how, people, and by the way, people say, listen, I've had bad experiences in religion. I've had bad experiences with Christians. The church has hurt me. Well, following Christ and following God is not about people or about institutions that can hurt us. The religious institution hurt Jesus. They crucified him.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
The religious people crucified him. He's well aware of what it means to be around people who
He's got that same story that you have to a certain degree, just a little bit worse.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And so I think that don't let the actions of other people who claim to be Christian turn you off, because it's not about them. It's about an individual relationship. And I think that we need to see that as opposed to be swayed by the actions and thoughts of other people, because they should be walking in a way that it's attractive to you in truth, but it may not be. So don't rely on that from other people.
That's just when you mention that, I think back to my story, because I've not always been a Jesus follower. And that was the same thing. Oh, this guy hurt me. This person did this. It's like, yep, they've definitely misrepresented Jesus greatly in my life. But if you rely on people to be the true north of who Jesus is, they're going to fail you at some point.
Absolutely.
Even the ones that are doing
it's impossible they won't.
Even the ones that are doing a great job. Your pastor at your church, the one that's up there every Sunday, whatever that is, there's going to be some point when they're human. And yeah, we're all hypocrites, right? We all believe this, but we can't make that mark, and Jesus bridges that, right?
Absolutely.
That's what it's all about. So yeah, that was as you're talking about that was a big part of my journey. And I'm even careful about that now, It's like just we as Jesus following leaders, men, entrepreneurs in the business space, we have a way that we've got to show up, and it's not always going to be perfect. You just got to ask for that forgiveness,
picture, Yes.
Yeah.
I had a word picture the other day. Matt, as we sit here, I am overweight. I'm probably about 30 pounds overweight. Okay. And I've been struggling with this for a while. And I don't know if I probably have an emotional addiction to food. There's something there that I got to work through, that I'm trying to do that. But I was praying and I was like, God, why do I have such a struggle with this? What is it? And because in the Bible, it tells us we are crucified with Christ, right? And so when he died and he was raised again, there were things that were also crucified with him. Our sin was. Our flesh still lives on after sometimes. We still struggle with things, but we are a new creation when you pursue Christ and you embrace what he's done for us. So I was like, God, why, if I was crucified with you, why do I still struggle with these problems, right? Patience can be another one of mine. Just some different struggles that I go, these aren't from God. These are just kind of, and I felt I had this word picture revealed to me that was like, because when Jesus raised from the dead, he came out of the grave and left behind sin. John, you never came out of the grave. You're hovering around it. Yeah. And I thought there's so much that we can embrace of what he's done for us that we don't. Do I really believe in the power that comes from God? Do I really believe that? And yeah, I do. But I'm the one that has to submit and walk away from stuff.
Yeah.
It's not about trying harder. It's about submitting to what he has for us.
Yeah, because we can't do it on our own.
No way.
And the harder you try, seems like the harder you try, the harder you fail. At least that's been my struggles, right? Exactly. My challenges. So you just got to turn it over. And sometimes you just don't know what that looks like because you want to have that control. You want to have your hand in it because you think you can control it, and you can't.
That's right.
Love it.
We're not meant to.
No, man. So much. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah.
We'll have to follow up and do another episode because I've got some more things I want to dive into. When you came in here, we close out every episode the same way. We've got our big, to pay honor to the painting industry, we have our big color swatch wall. You grab your favorite color and you have a sentence statement. You haven't shared it with me, but this is what you want to leave with the world.
Yeah, I do.
When you leave it, what is it?
All right. So this was pretty easy because you asked us to do that. And I think that this to me, it's a Bible verse. That's been very, foundational for me, and it's Romans 8:28. And we know that all things work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to his purpose. Not some things, not most things, all things. And people will also say, well, everything turns into good. That's not what it says, Matt. It says, for those who love God and are called according to his purpose. Yeah. These sex offenses that I dealt with, there's nothing good there.
No.
There's nothing good there. But for those who have been survivors of abuse, he can turn the ashes into glory. That's what he wants to do. And so there can be good that comes from bad things that will never be good. The bad thing will never be good, but the fruit from it
yes,
can be. I was in a place where all I could do is wake up and cry and read my Bible. Good has come from it.
Yeah.
There are times that, where I was involved in that shooting, good came from it. And I think we have to be flexible to see what God is doing in our lives and to share those things. And so that's my verse. And that's what we'll put up on the wall. And that's my encouragement to others is, man, love God, be called according to his purpose, walk in faith, walk in truth. There's another, and I could have used this one too, and I'll leave with this, but there's another passage in the Bible it's Micah 6:8. And it said, he has shown you, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you but to do justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with God? That's a pretty good assignment. When we have a question, what do I do? What am I going to do today? Well, walk justly. Be merciful and love God and walk humbly. That's a pretty good assignment. And I think if we focus on that, we're in pretty good shape.
Jon Holsten, thanks for coming out.
Yeah.
That's a wrap.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Hey, if you're a faith-based father and you have a son who is entering into adolescence and manhood, you've got to check out an experience that we have June 2024. It is the father-son hike of a lifetime on the Camino de Santiago in Spain. I'm going to be taking a group of men and their sons over to Spain to hike some of the most beautiful scenery through northern Spain on the Camino de Santiago. We're going to hike 6 days, 70 miles, 200,000 steps, and have completely disconnected, unplugged, uninterrupted time with our sons. We are going to grow and bond and deepen our relationships with our sons through some very intentionally curated adventures, challenges, and experiences. And we're going to do so in the company of other faith-based men who have the same desire to grow and deepen their story with their son. If you're interested in this adventure with us, go to mattshoup.com, click the Go to Spain button, and check out the father-son hike of a lifetime.